Hey everybody, Mr. Macintosh here, and in today's video we're going to do a deep dive on how to boot your brand new Apple Silicon Mac into DFU mode and restore macOS using Apple Configurator 2 with a second Mac. Again, this is a deep dive. I created a quick video on how to do that, and I'll link that in the description if you want to just do this really quickly. But if you want the technical details of how all this works and what cables you need, the operating systems that are required, the versions of Apple Configurator 2, how this system works, and then troubleshooting, this is the video for you. Let's jump in and get started. I wrote an article that goes over all the steps that you're going to need to know when you want to boot into DFU mode on your Apple Silicon Mac and restore macOS firmware, the entire operating system with Apple Configurator 2. So let's get started on some of the steps that we're going to need to do here. Let's talk about the order of restoration that you want to do when you need to reinstall Mac OS. First of all, you can see on the screen that this Mac is in big trouble. It does not have Mac OS recovery or system recovery, and that's why I put these in these order of processes here, because with Apple Silicon we have now two recovery systems, macOS recovery and system recovery, and these are all built in to protect each other. So each step of the way there's an additional layer of protection, because one thing you need to know is internet recovery is gone. It's dead on Apple Silicon Macs. You do not have to worry about booting to internet recovery anymore, because that had problems. It worked, but sometimes they had a bunch of problems. You don't have to worry about that anymore. Let's say macOS recovery doesn't work. It's going to seamlessly boot into system recovery, another hidden partition on the Apple Silicon Mac. Let's say that's broken. Well, step number 3 that you can do is you can boot your USB install drive on Apple Silicon. That is now enabled by default. It wasn't on T2 Mac with Intel. You had to go in there and turn that on to be able to boot to external media. Now you can just plug in your USB drive or your external hard drive and boot right to a macOS Big Sur installer to reinstall macOS. So that's the third thing. The fourth option is if just macOS recovery and system recovery are broke, but macOS is fine, and you want to retain your data, there's the new option to revive. And again, the revive option is to use Apple Configurator 2 and then reinstall macOS and system recovery to retain your data. So that's a really great option. So let's say your operating system is running fine, but when you try to boot into recovery or access startup options, it doesn't work. So that's what's actually happening here. If you power on this Mac, macOS recovery and system recovery are dead. So it's telling you that you need to go to this site to be able to restore, and that's why we're here to a revive option, and that would fix this. And then you wouldn't get this error, and you would be able to boot into the Mac startup utility that shows you the startup options. The fifth option is the Apple Configurator Restore. That will basically do 3 things: erase the drive, reinstall macOS recovery, and then reinstall macOS Big Sur all in one shot. And it only takes about 15 minutes or less to do that entire process. So if you need to reinstall multiple Macs with the operating system, this is a great way to do this. But if you just want to be able to reinstall quickly, because think about it, if you boot to the startup utility and go into recovery, you still have to download the entire 13 gigabyte file from Apple in a recovery. So that can take anywhere between 1 and 3 hours, depending on your speed and depending on Apple servers. That's a real quick way. Keep in mind, if you have macOS on your external hard drive, that will work too, because it's taking the data from the external hard drive. And see, here's one here that you can see. This is a Thunderbolt drive that I've got that I'm using Apple's Thunderbolt 2 to Thunderbolt 3 USB-C connector, and I've got multiple different versions of the macOS operating system on here, and I'll show you how that works too. That's step 5. Those are all the steps in order that you should try to follow when you need to reinstall macOS. So the next step we want to talk about here, to talk about the requirements. So the first thing that we want to go over when we're talking about the requirements is that you need obviously you need a second Mac. So that's going to be kind of a pain. If your Mac's like this, where it says that you need to restore, you're kind of in trouble. So you either got to visit an Apple store, or hopefully you have a friend that has a second Mac that you can kind of borrow to be able to do this. So again, it's not the greatest situation if you're in here, but keep in mind, that's why I talked about that there's 2 different backups, macOS recovery and system recovery, to be able to help you. And of course, the external hard disk. It's very rare that you would need to do this in a normal situation. So 3 lines of defense before you would even need to get to second Mac. But again, you're here because of that. That's why we're going to talk about how to do this. So the next thing we need to do is, again, your host Mac Apple says it needs to be on 10.15.6 Catalina or newer, but I recommend being on Big Sur or newer when you're restoring Big Sur. And you also need to have Apple Configurator 2 downloaded and install version 2.13.2 or newer as of this taping. That's the most compatible version with all the things you're going to need to do. 2.13.1 works, but the download piece does not work. You'll have to drag the ISPW over and it still works if you have that old version. But again, update and get the latest version, you'll be fine. The next thing is you'll need internet access on the host Mac. This is the target Mac that we're going to install. The host Mac has all the files and everything you need to do. This needs to have internet access without any kind of proxies and what must allow all network traffic from Apple. The next thing you're going to need is a cable to transfer the data from the host to the target. The best thing is the charge cable that came with your Mac works perfectly. So you don't need to buy any additional charge cable. But let's say you need it. I also recommend that when you do this process, unless you're at 100% battery power, you should have both of them charging at the same time so you don't have any possibility of the machines powering down or going to sleep when you're trying to do this process. Now let's talk about the other cables that you could use. You can actually use a Thunderbolt 3 cable, and you can tell that because you can see the Thunderbolt icon on there, and you can use one of these. You can also use a USB 3.1 cable here. And you can see this is a certified HP cable that's 3.1 that will work also. Now, there's another situation that wonder if your Mac, you don't have a newer Mac with USB-C on it. The best thing is that if you have like a 2015 or an iMac that's older or a Mac Mini that doesn't have USB-C, you can use a USB-A to USB-C cable to do the same transfer. So let's say you had a 2015 MacBook Pro that just has Thunderbolt 2 and USB-A. You can use that Mac to be able to do this. So that's a great thing to be able to have. The next piece is where do you got to plug in the cord? So let's get our charge cable here. Now this has changed. If you've done this whole process to restore Bridge OS on an Intel Mac, the port that you're going to use has changed, so it's a little bit confusing. The best part is, on the host Mac, doesn't matter what port you're going to plug it in. You can plug it in anywhere. On the target Mac, though, on Apple Silicon, you have to make sure that you use the port closest to the LCD screen, so all the way back here. That's it. The Intel Mac, you needed the port that was closest to the trackpad. Now, when you plug it into power, it's going to immediately turn on the Mac. You will want to make sure that you power it down so it's off before we go to the next step here. And it's off, we're ready to go. Once we have that plugged in, we're ready for the next step. So this is the part where I talk about getting Apple Configurator 2. Just go to the App Store, and there's a link here to download it directly. And I've already got that powered up, so we're going to move into the next part. So we're going to pull up Apple Configurator 2, and this is what it looks like when the Mac is powered off. It says connect the device to Apple Configurator 2 to begin. So move this out of the way a little bit so we can go to the next instructions. I've got Apple's instructions here that tell you exactly what to do, but I gotta be honest with you, they don't work very well the way they are instructed. And honestly, they didn't work good for the Intel devices either. That's why my other article worked out so well, because I worked out the exact process that works every single time on command. So it does tell you that you hold on the power button first and then press all these for 10 seconds. And then here's the ports that it shows you. Make sure you do the back one, kind of like what I just said, and then the air is the same way here. I mentioned a little thing about the firmware that you're on, because the initial Macs were shipped from the factory were in an older version of firmware, and there's been some trouble to get into DFU mode. I will get into step 2 if this first step does not work, and how to get it into DFU mode next. So my instructions, I've got a little bitty picture here that kind of goes over what you need to do. Now this is a little bit dated because the new process that I've worked on here, I'm going to scroll up right here, this update part, and I'm going to clarify this article a little bit more to make this kind of the main way to go, is that we're going to hold down all 4 of the keys the same time. We're not going to click the power button first, like the Apple instructions kind of say, because the Apple instructions say hold on the power, then hold on the keys for 10 seconds. In this way, we're going to hold on all the keys for 10 seconds, then let go of the keyboard commands and keep holding power for an additional 8 seconds for 18 seconds total, and then it'll be in DFU mode. So, hey, let's get started with that. So we're going to open up Apple Configurator 2, and it's going to be ready to go because we want to be able to see the icon as soon as it gets into DFU mode. So let's go to the Mac. We're going to go through those steps, and I'm going to count 1,000, so to try to get the seconds exactly the same to get to that 10-second mark. And we're going to walk through it right now. So here we go. Power, right shift, left control, left option. Ready, go. 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000, 4, 1,000, 5, 1,000, 6, 1,000, 7, 1,000, 8, 1,000, 9, 1,000, 10, 1,000, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, DFU mode every time. Now keep in mind, this process is very frustrating. I can't tell you how many users have reached out to me and said, I cannot, whatever I do, get my Mac into DFU mode, my Apple Silicon Mac. And the problem is if you're like a second or two off in any of those steps, like letting go of these keys or maybe not pressing down power long enough or any of those, it will not boot. And you'll see this blank screen and you're wondering what the heck is going on here. So you saw it happen. It works. The next step is let's say you were on the older firmware and no matter what you do, you still can't get in there. There was a Mac Rumors forum user that came up with a process to work it until you get to 11.01 to get the firmware updated. So this process works every time. This Mac got the newer firmware, got the 11.01, so we can boot it every time, just like we followed here to get into DFU mode. So the process for if you're having trouble and you're on the older firmware, like that it still won't work these steps. The process you need to do is boot into the startup options first, then do those steps. Let's jump in and show you how to do it. Okay, to boot your Mac up and start up recovery for Apple Silicon, all you need to do now is instead of turning it on and then holding down Command R for Apple Silicon, you just hold down the power button. You'll see the Mac power up and it'll say continue holding for startup options. You keep holding, and as soon as it changes to loading startup options, you can let go of the power button and it's going to boot into the new recovery menu for Apple Silicon. We'll give it a second here and you'll start to see the options, and give it another second and you'll see Macintosh hard drive there. And that's it. To get into, if you want to click options and then click continue, that'll boot you into macOS recovery. But again, this is the step we're going to try if you were having trouble getting to DFU mode before. So you see the padlock, you see the recovery menu, you're ready to try the next steps here. So all we'll do is we'll hold down power and then the 3 keys, and we're going to try again. 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000, 4, 1,000, 5, 1,000, 6, 1,000, 7, 1,000, 8, 1,000, 9, 1,000, 10, 1,000, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. And there we go. So again, that's the other way to get in if you're having problems with trying to get into DFU mode when you're just powering on and you're on the older firmware and you haven't updated 11.01. So hopefully that gets you into recovery. And again, if you're seeing this a lot later after many revisions of Big Sur, you will never have to do this part again. But it's kind of neat to see that you can still get into DFU mode from the startup recovery screen. So now that we are in DFU mode, we can talk about the options that are available to us now. So if we go over to Apple Configurator and we click on it, when we right click, we've got the menu and we have 2 options that we can do. Advanced to revive device. And what that's going to do is download the ISPW file from Apple and extract the actual macOS recovery and system recovery and reinstall it on Apple Silicon. And again, that's for if, let's say, for example, you have the operating system on there and all your files are fine, but you booted into recovery and for some reason it won't start up. It gives you a prohibited sign or whatever, and something's wrong with recovery. So you can't get into do Time Machine, you can't get into Disk Utility and do those things. And this is a perfect option to be able to fix recovery without having to completely erase macOS and your hard drive and everything with the restore option that we'll talk about next. So that as soon as you click revive, it's immediately going to start. There's no other secondary menu that kind of warns you. It just immediately jumps in and starts downloading from Apple the restore file. So that's revive. The next option is right click and then restore. This does have an additional menu before it starts warning you about what it's going to do. So let's click on that so we can read that. Do you want to restore and update MacBook Pro to the latest firmware version? All of your media and other data will be erased from the primary disk. So what this means again is that it's going to erase Mac OS recovery, system recovery, your entire Macintosh hard drive and data drive, and then reinstall recovery, system recovery, and Mac OS. And it'll do all that within however long it takes to download the ISPW file from Apple, which could be anywhere between a half hour and 2 hours. And then it takes about 15 minutes to do the actual install. So that's what would happen if you click this right now. It would start to download the ISPW file. But I want to go even deeper and show you an additional way to do this if you were going to restore Apple Silicon device more than once. Or if let's say you work in a business or a school or a computer repair place where you're going to restore multiple Apple Silicon devices, just download the ISPW file. So I've got my site up here. Be keeping track of all the ISPW firmware files directly from Apple. And I'm going to keep them here in this database. Now, if you look at this link here, this is the direct 13.6 gigabyte macOS Big Sur 1101 ISPW file. Now, I want to make sure that you understand where this is coming from, because I would never recommend downloading an Apple operating system or ISPW from a site that's not directly from Apple. So this link is directly from Apple. How do I know that? Well, I'm going to right click on the actual link that I have here. We're going to copy the real link, and then we're going to just paste it up here. Paste. Now, if we're going to scroll all the way to the front, well, first of all, we see what the name of the ISPW file is, right? But we're going to scroll all the way to the front to look at the domain. And there it is, http updates-http CDN, Content Delivery Network, -apple.com. So that's the apple.com domain. It's coming directly from Apple to be able to get this file. So I wanted to make sure you guys understand that that's a safe URL. So that's it. Click this and it'll download to your downloads folder. And once that's done, I've already done that part, and I'll open up Finder. Here is my ISPW file right here, 20B29. So all you need to do is drag that over here, and you'll see it turn into a plus sign and let go. And now you're presented with a new menu. Do you want to install macOS firmware version 11.0.1 on MacBook Pro? Click Restore to reset to factory settings. Click Revive to preserve all content and settings. And that kind of is a real quick thing, but it doesn't really tell you about erasing the drive. So it's a little bit iffy, right? But again, the restore is going to do the same thing that we just talked about, and the revive is going to do the same thing that we just talked about. The best part about this way is that it's going to skip the download part. So you're going to literally save yourself 1 to 2 hours of downloading, and then all you're going to do is all it's going to do is jump right into reinstalling macOS recovery on the revive and macOS Big Sur on the restore. So let's jump in and do the restore so you can kind of see that in action. Click Restore. You're going to see a new pop-up menu, and it jumps immediately into installing system. Before, if you didn't drag it over, it would have shown downloading, then unzipping, then preparing, and then installing. 4 additional steps if you had to download it from the first part, if you didn't just drag the file over here to Apple Configurator 2. So we'll give this a second, and I wanted to open up Activity Monitor, and you'll be able to see the transfer speed. Look at this, we're going around 172 megabytes a second here on transferring everything to, and look, we've already transferred it, and we're starting up the Apple Silicon device. That's how quick this is going here. Now I want to show you something real quick. This is a deep dive video, right? So we're going to open up a new window. We're going to go into Private Temp, and I'm going to show you the folder where all this work is done. Look at this. This is the restore bundle that's prepared when it unpacks the ISPW. All these pieces here are, like, for example, this 12.01, that's macOS Big Sur. All these pieces, like this one, is macOS Recovery. And then we've got Apple Diagnostics. We've got all these other pieces. The firmware is all stored here while it prepares and moves it on over. I just wanted to show you that because I think you guys would think that that's actually pretty cool if you wanted to kind of dive in and see all the pieces of how macOS is restored on Apple Silicon. So that's that. Now, Again, this process, as you can see, it's already almost at the end of the progress bar here, but this is going to kind of continue to go for the next 5 minutes or so until it's finished. So that's actually the process, and that's restoring macOS on the new Apple Silicon. Now, the end part that I wanted to talk about was troubleshooting. So I pulled up a couple error screens that I wanted to go over that you might get when you're trying to do the DFU mode Apple Configurator 2 restore process. The first one is the system cannot be restored on this device. No applicable system images were provided. This is an error you'll get if you're running an older version of Apple Configurator 2, version 2.13.1. If you try to click the restore button, because this version is not ready to download macOS ISPW files from Apple yet. So that's one of the errors that you get. You'll also get this if you're trying to put an ISPW file that's not compatible with this version. So for example, if you had an old beta version of ISPW of Big Sur that did not have all the pieces needed for Apple Silicon, this is the message you're going to get, because it's going to check the P list to say, is this device ID in here? And if it's not, it's going to immediately reject it. So that's one error. The next error that you're going to get, it says the system cannot be restored on this device. The operation couldn't be completed. It failed to receive a message from the device. This is if there's any kind of a communication problem. If any of these cables got unplugged, or if there was any kind of a problem with the transfer, this is an error that you're going to get. The next one is the system cannot be restored on this device. The underlying service unexpectedly quit. If there's any kind of a problem during the transfer or something crashes, this is another message that you receive if there's a problem. This is another message that it says it unexpectedly quit, and that's the same type of message as before, and that can happen if the process was interrupted, and it gives you a stop message, but it's already stopped at that point. The system could not be restored to this device. It failed to unzip the restore bundle. Now this is an interesting one, and I had this happen to me, and I've got a fix for you if you have any of these messages. Remember that directory that I showed you? And actually, I wanted to make sure. Oh, and that when it failed, this is what you actually would see. You actually see a MacBook Pro logo once it failed like that. I thought that was kind of neat. Back to that temporary directory that we were kind of talking about here, that private temp in this restore bundle. If that happens, delete this folder. You're not deleting anything. All it is a staging area for the files that it's going to do to transfer from that ISPW. So if you just right click on this folder and delete it, or actually, excuse me, go back to temp and then right click on here and click move to trash, that's all you really need to do. And then that should solve that issue, and then try the restore again, and that should fix the issue. So that's about it, guys. I hope this video helped you and helps you understand the whole process of the new way to restore. Again, this opens up so many doors. Finally, the Mac is able to be restored just like iOS and iPad devices can be with DFU mode. It's really exciting to have this option to be able to be used. So again, I hope this video created value for you. If it did, click on that subscribe button. I'd really appreciate it, and we'll catch you in the next video. Have a good day.